So thanks for joining this conversation today. You'll see that I have a fantastic guest who has joined actually the first of my video series with regards to everything that's kind of happening within the tech space and some interesting topics. So this chat is actually with the fantastic Andrey Breslav next to me. I'll introduce him in a sec, but for all those that don't know me in my network, I'm Charlotte and I head up the Java and Kotlin recruitment team at Understanding Recruitment. And just for context, so I have solely been recruiting Java and Kotlin engineers throughout my entire recruitment career, and that's been for almost the last 6 years now. So I find all kind of topics in and around those programming languages, but also the actual kind of wider tech realm itself, super interesting. And as a consistently evolving landscape, it's so important to kind of remain on top of recent trends, but also hear from prominent speakers like Andrey and, you know, decision makers in the tech space to understand sort of their views on a few things that are going on at the moment. So just for context, I actually first met Andrey at a Silicon Brighton event. They put on some great events all across loads of different tech areas. So definitely go check that out because there'll definitely be a community there for you. And obviously, Andrey was a guest speaker. Lee Turner organised to speak at the Kotlin Brighton event. And Andrey himself was one of the sort of co-creators and lead engineers behind the whole Kotlin programming language during his time at JetBrains. But I'll let Andrey introduce himself in a bit further detail.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hi Charlotte, thanks for having me. Thank you for the introduction. So as of my Kotlin related past, I was in charge of the project since its conception in 2010 till my departure in 2020. So we started with very few part-time people, and when I left, we had about 100 people, including like 70 engineers working on the project. It was a very interesting journey, and I saw Kotlin develop through all the versions from 0 to 1.4. And I also oversaw the language design during that time. Since then, other people have taken over, and I'm very happy with what they're doing, but still always very open to chatting about Kotlin.
Yeah, awesome. And this is like not only a chat just about sort of your journey with Kotlin, but you've also gone on to do like, you know, new things now that you've moved away from JetBrains. And we're going to be talking all about that later, including obviously going more down the entrepreneurship route and setting up your own tech startup in a really important space, but like I believe is something that has rightly so been growing in terms of popularity and also need as well globally. But we've got loads of discussion topics coming up. We will start with Kotlin. I think there's a lot of content online and previous recordings more about your journey at JetBrains actually building the language. So we won't kind of touch on that too much because I know that you've got a lot of content online about that. That's what obviously we heard all about when at the tech meetup last November. But I think what we can discuss just with regards to Kotlin before we move on to anything else is maybe some of the recent enhancements and updates that we've actually seen more recently in Kotlin.
So Kotlin started off as a JVM language, so targeted mostly at Java developers, people in the Java ecosystem. Back in the day, it was mostly server-side developers. Later on, Android came along, and over time, the scope widened quite a bit. And currently, this is the actual trend. So Kotlin is very strong on the Android side. It's pretty strong on the server side, but also there are ideas about multi-platform development that is going to be the new way of doing things because we really want to reuse code between different platforms, and Kotlin is big on multi-platform. And so the primary focus in terms of adding new things to the language and to the Kotlin ecosystem is one part multi-platform development, and a lot happening in that space. So compose multi-platform and other multi-platform features, Project Emperor, and other things like that. But also, there is a lot of internal kind of behind-the-scenes work on the new compiler, K2, and that is actually taking a lot of the effort on the team side, as far as I understand. And fortunately, K2 is coming very close to full release. So that's going to be a huge infrastructural improvement for everybody because it brings more performance. It will be much better integrated with all the needs of other clients of the compiler than simply producing a runnable binary. So there's ID services and all other kinds of things. So that's going to be a huge thing when it finally gets released. It took quite a while. So it was
that's a really interesting insight, because I think there's not been too much kind of like public talk about that. It seems like you've got some insider knowledge here, but that's really, really great to know.
Well, I hope we were communicating this reasonably openly. At least it's on all the release notes everywhere. But yeah, it's not something that draws the most attention because it's a compiler, not a language feature. But it's going to be big, and I hope a lot of people are already using it, like in preview capacity. So K2, we started it when I was still on the team. And it was, I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was something like 2019. And it was a very long project to basically replace all the meaningful parts of the compiler with something much more performant and also more robust and all that. So it's like a huge project, really. Like a compiler is a very big program, and that's being finished right now. And it also enables many things that were impractical to implement in previous versions of the compiler.
I think when you hosted the Tech Talk back in November in Brighton, it was really interesting for me to hear that actually when Kotlin was initially sort of put together, created by you, it wasn't actually intended for mobile purposes at all. That actually kind of came about. I think I remember you saying, like, through the community, the tech community itself, on these chats kind of saying, oh, actually, we're running this, like, would Kotlin work to solve this issue? And with the kind of growth of the language, not only from obviously the server side, which was its intention to be more performant than Java had ever been, because it was just taking so long to get these releases. Do you think K2 is going to play a really big part for actually the Android community as well?
Well, so the compiler will be relevant for all users, because, we did intend Kotlin to be a more productive language than Java. And this obviously starts with a more expressive syntax, a more readable kind of code, less boilerplate, that also removes noise and makes reading easier and all that, which I think worked fairly well. But also we, at the same time, we lost quite a bit in productivity because of the compiler performance. It takes longer to build Kotlin projects than it does Java projects. And it used to be like a very big issue. Then we worked very hard on performance of the first compiler, and made it reasonably good. But K2 will be quite a bit faster and will improve the development experience and also build times quite a bit. So this will add to the whole productivity story on both on the Android side and the server side, and any other application written in Kotlin will benefit from that.
Awesome. Well, I think a lot of people will be glad to hear that, especially with, like, the rise in some applications which are now receiving sort of millions more users in the last kind of few years or so. They do need to make sure that they're obviously focusing everything at the moment on scalability and performance. That is essentially all of the challenges that they're looking to kind of address.
Yeah, so it's not so much about the scalability of the application itself. It's more about the development. Development round trip speed is how long it takes you to get the code to run. And for a developer, it's an important thing. Like when you have written some code, like you have it there, you want to run it and see if it works well. And between you and that result stands the compilation time. And the compilation time can be like a few seconds, can be close to a minute if it's a big project. And it's very frustrating to have to wait so long when you already know, like, you have it there, or you really want to see a result. So it can really kill your productivity, because you have to sit there and wait. And most people won't just sit still. They will get distracted with something. They will lose focus, lose context. it's incredibly annoying. It takes a pretty big toll on productivity. So even for the development loop, it is a big impact. But also how long you have to wait for your project to build after, for example, a repository update. When you got other people's work on the team, you have to recompile everything to get your new and up-to-date version of your repo running on your machine, or you're waiting for your tests to run, or for your build to complete to be tested and released. All that has a lot of compilation time in it. And so if we cut this compilation time in half, for example, or
it's more productivity time, right?
it's a lot more productivity time. Exactly.
I was going to say, this is probably not only good news to developers that to spend their time waiting to see if what they've written works, but also to managers when they have deadlines, right? Okay, maybe now we're actually going to be able to work closer.
Well, yeah, it's definitely more fun and less frustration. Also, it's less context switches and overall much more comfortable experience. Yeah, so it's quite interesting that in terms of runtime performance, how fast the application is, Kotlin was never like a big overhead compared to Java. I think we managed to keep it reasonably fast, like more or less indistinguishably fast in most things. And this was never a bottleneck for the Kotlin ecosystem, but the compilation time was. And yeah, hopefully it will improve quite a bit.
Awesome. A key thing to kind of talk about is like who's using Kotlin at the moment. Obviously, as a recruiter, I've seen from the recruitment side, and when I discuss with CTOs and VPs of engineering what their tech stack is, the ones that are using Kotlin, like there is no, I would say, trend in terms of industry at all. Or even when we're looking at like size of company, for me and what I've experienced, you know, it is completely down to using the right tool for the right job. And whether that is a pet technology company that I work with that kind of does Fitbits for animals that are building everything in Kotlin, migrating from Ruby to Kotlin, or whether it's a payments platform, again, that's decided to use Kotlin. What are your kind of experiences and takes on who is not only working with Kotlin, but finding it most kind of efficient for what they're building at the moment?
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting question. I've never actually tried to characterize the people who are using Kotlin now, but I think there are at least two very big groups that they intersect a little bit. It's I would say pragmatists and hipsters. So some people who just enjoy like new modern technology because it's more fun than old boring technology. Let's label them hipsters for a while, for now. And they definitely enjoy learning a new shiny language, which Kotlin definitely is. And you know, it's a separate enjoyment in the development process to get to play with shiny toys, and I like that a lot.
Oh, absolutely. And even in the last few years, there's some new things that have popped up. I don't know if you've ever touched Rust before, but that's definitely a shiny one that as soon as the developer's touching it right now, that they don't want to go back because it's just.
Yes, so and if you have to run on the Java platform, then the shiniest toy you have is Kotlin.
Exactly.
And a lot of people pretty consciously use this to attract talent. Like if somebody is choosing between a backend Java job or a backend Kotlin job, if they are so inclined, the Kotlin job will be more fun just by virtue of being a Kotlin job.
And I testify and completely agree with that. From when I have a candidate that would be great for both opportunities, you know, Kotlin is that shinier version of Java. So of course they want to be able to get their hands on it. And what I've obviously found throughout my last almost 6 years of recruiting is that, again, once someone is able to touch Kotlin, work with Kotlin for the first time, getting them to move back into just a Java, like 100% Java tech stack is almost impossible, because they've then recognized why Kotlin exists and the, you know, parts of Java that it addresses that completely removes the nitty-gritty that they had to do before that just wasted time.
Yeah, I think it's a big factor. So this is one big motivation, but I guess this is the motivation to start. And as you rightfully say, when you get into the Kotlin ecosystem and you kind of get the hang of how things work and what advantages Kotlin gives, a lot of people just prefer it for its merit. And so there is, I think, a big intersection between hipsters and pragmatists. But on the pragmatic side, there are quite a few things that make Kotlin stand out, because it's, on the one hand, it's a safe, type-safe, and runtime-safe language with all the modern features. So that's a pretty good fit for a big project that's being developed over a long time by a lot of people. And if you have a lot of code, you start depending on things like tooling, like how good your IDE infrastructure is, how precise your refactoring will be, how much time you will spend fixing little syntax errors all over the code base after you've renamed something or refactored something else.
Yeah.
So Kotlin is pretty good in this sense, pragmatically, and also there is quite a bit of opportunity for code reuse, and just even outside of the multi-platform case, it's still expertise reuse, and it's a modern tool set that helps you work both on the server side and the mobile, and nowadays the browser as well. So it's a pretty well-rounded choice for a team that wants to target different platforms. So this is like a pretty strong pragmatic aspect. And I think the two intersect quite a bit. So if you're a hiring manager, just appealing to talent is already a very pragmatic consideration for you.
It's a nice tactical move from the tech industry to get the best. But on that note, like, have you had any companies or, you know, prominent members or decision makers within the tech community that have actually come to you and said, like, look, we've changed our tech stack or migrated to Kotlin, and this is the case study on how much it's completely changed, you know, our performance or user experience? Like, have you got any examples that you are able to share of people that have really come to you to almost kind of explain their positive journey with it?
Oh, there's been quite a few case studies that are pretty well publicized. I mean, there are different very interesting companies doing very interesting things there. So some people would just migrate their entire code base onto Kotlin because they want to develop it in a new way. Some people a lot of people will just mix Kotlin and Java with like, we had a bunch of code before Kotlin came along, and now we're writing all our new code in Kotlin, like what the Android platform is doing, for example. All the new libraries are in Kotlin, but there is a lot of historically very relevant Java code base there. You know, it's I'm afraid if I'll be remembering particular case studies, I'll misremember a lot. So unfortunately, I have to refer people to like just Google a Kotlin case study. That's
okay. Yeah, no, that's no. I'll be able to find some and share as well. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, so there's been quite a few from both like very well-known companies and like startups and experimenting people, also like government agencies, but like we had everybody from Microsoft to the Norwegian tax office use Kotlin. So, you know,
it's gone global. Cool. Well, no, I think that's like a fantastic kind of start to this discussion, which is all about talking about something that, you know, you did spend so many years. And like I said, I would genuinely recommend anyone who's ever worked with Kotlin or even thinking about starting to work with it to watch that recorded Kotlin Brighton talk that you did, because it obviously explained the whole process from even where the concept of creating a new language came from all the way through to, like, you know, the actual roller coaster of the journey that you went on, learning so many things, you know, learning from failures, but also now being able to reflect back, able to see that there were some things, and I know that you touched on, for example, trying to, you know, do too much of the hands-on and not having enough people to delegate the management to, and even learning that concept rather than just trying to manage everything yourself was a really important, you know, stressful challenge that you had to manage. And I think that brings us on to the next topic, which I'm really excited to talk more about. And I'd love for you to introduce the startup that you have built, which is all around the mental health in tech industry.
So in 2017, I really wanted to sort of make use of my non-technical personality traits, and those being like wanting to make an impact outside of the programming space. So it felt great working on Kotlin, and and things were going pretty well there. But also, I really felt like I could probably address some things that non-programmers care about. So I started looking into mental health and particularly psychotherapy, which, pretty universally around the world, it's like underappreciated by a lot of people. So a lot of people have this sort of vague idea of what therapy is and who needs it and how they can or cannot benefit from it. It was pretty frustrating seeing a lot of people who could definitely improve their lives quite a bit through having, 10, 20 sessions. And like, still, they could really benefit, and they were investing a lot of time and effort into self-improvement of different kinds, but we're not using this incredibly effective particular way of improving their life. It felt like something was going wrong in the world. So I really wanted to make therapy more available. And this is why we started this. Like, for me, it was a side project. I was still in charge of Kotlin, and in parallel, we started this startup, which basically we selected, like we worked with some researchers who study therapy, and they helped us develop a procedure to do two things, basically. One is talk to a therapist and see whether they are actually qualified, because it's one thing to have gone through the training and another to actually practice well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for context, all this is happening in Russia. So regulations are different around the world. Somewhere, like some other places will have much higher bars to qualify as a therapist. Russia has less regulation around this. Okay. I don't think UK has much like formal regulation, but associations are strong here. So probably the landscape is a little different. So in any case, in Russia, it was really relevant to just make sure that we know which therapists are actually practicing well. Mm-hmm. That was one thing. Another thing was to help people find a matching therapist, a therapist that will help them in particular, because there is quite a bit of dependency between like the personality of the client and personality and the style of a therapist. So we, as like, everybody would like therapy to be this kind of scientific thing that just reliably works no matter what. The truth is, it is like studied rigorously, but the studies find that there is quite a bit of like a big part of the effect depends on the alliance between the client and the therapist. So it is important to find a therapist that actually works for you, regardless of their qualifications. So we did both. And right now, after 6 years, we have about 900 therapists, and we helped about 75,000 people find their therapists. It's been an interesting journey building a business. It was my first time starting a company and doing anything like that in parallel with managing a big team. Was an idea I cannot recommend anybody to try at home.
You
Yeah,
said
but
the
still,
same when you built the Kotlin language. You said, I don't recommend anybody does this, by the way.
well, that's an interesting observation. Yeah, so I did a lot of things I can't recommend other people do. Yeah, so maybe it's a tendency of mine to do stupid things that so that other people don't have to. Yeah, so in any case, so this company is now helping quite a few people. I think we have over 2,000 new clients every month.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, so and for me, the mission was to make effective therapy more available. And we were not the only people doing this in the Russian-speaking space, but we did play a significant part, and I'm very happy how it turned out. Yeah, and so going back to your question, so in terms of the relevance of this project to the tech space in particular, it was a very interesting effect. Of course, our first clients were people from our social networks, like mine and my co-founders. So my co-founder is a psychologist. So we had a lot of people from like her social networks and her circles, and of course, like a lot of the initial base of therapists were people she knew personally, personally selected. Yeah, but also a lot of the clients were from my social circles, and those were like tech people who studied science, and we had this kind of two strata in our clientele. It was quite interesting. Over time, it widened quite a bit. So initially, there was like a big segment of our audience who were programmers. Also, like therapy is not cheap, so programmers are well paid. So a lot of them just could afford it, and many other people couldn't.
Afford the service.
Yeah. So in any case, we started with a big proportion of tech people in our audience. Nowadays, I don't think it's as significant, although it's still very well represented. And I myself was definitely talking a lot to the people I know and to the people who would listen to me, who would be tech people. And I was giving a lot of like public talks on therapy and emotions and like the relevance of the psychological things at work and all things like that. That was quite interesting. So talking to people in the tech space with knowing the everyday routines and how the industry operates, it was quite interesting discussing things around mental health and specifically burnout and managing your energy and other things like that. It was quite interesting. And I think I've seen quite a few people who said that therapy did help them balance their lifestyle, become more productive, work through some issues that were hindering them in many ways. So in this sense, we did help quite a few engineers as well.
That's amazing. And I think, there is this, as someone who's actually, I'll be very honest, I have done therapy myself. I found it insanely beneficial for my lifestyle. I was someone who before therapy was a workaholic. Don't get me wrong, I'd be checking my emails at 11 o'clock at night. I had some wider personal things going on, and it's definitely a topic that has increased in engagement. It has also done in popularity. I think what you've also done is, without even realizing it, but you also timed the creation of your startup at a really crucial point in, the 21st century, where COVID happened a few years later. And as we know, that completely rocked the boat when it came to, I think, people who had never even experienced mental health problems and challenges before, but a lot of people that didn't actually take it seriously, or if I'm feeling anxious, I'll just get over it, just have just take time for yourself for an hour and you'll feel better. Doesn't work that way. And trust me, I've been there to kind of see the journey. I think it's definitely with the rise of apps like Headspace and Calm, it's being more promoted as something to talk about, in a workplace, for example, as well. If you are struggling with issues for burnout, definitely is Here at my company, we have mental health champions. I know that it's a movement, a bit like the gender equality movement, and we've got International Women's Day tomorrow, and that's obviously a very, very key topic in the tech space that I'm passionate about too. But I think when we also look at things like neurodiversity, especially within tech, I think there's a very big way to go still when it comes to getting the right support in place for, you know, everyone. I'm a firm believer that everyone should be in therapy, not because everyone has problems, but for me, I very much am of the opinion that a problem shared is a problem halved, and we can improve our lives through discussing with people how we can work through problems rather than sitting on them and, you know, stressing ourselves out. But what do you think can be done? Because I think it's not actually talked about too much. And as someone who, you know, reads a lot of channels and blogs every day, I rarely see developers talking about their own experience with therapy. I see it for other, you know, social networks. Gen Z is a very, very big uptaker of therapy because we see its importance. But what do you think like employers or developers could do? So tech employers, where they have big teams of developers, how do you think they, or even developers on their own, should approach sort of spreading this awareness of mental health, and what would you recommend that they do? Because it's obviously seemed to be very successful with those in your tech community already that have kind of sought out therapy.
That's a very deep question. I think there are two very different approaches, like from the employer's perspective and from an individual's perspective. That would be different answers. Yeah, having done quite a lot of therapy myself, I can say that it does improve your like well-being overall if you're deliberate about it. So, you know, so one thing I'm trying to do myself is just sharing as much of my experience with therapy and different other things regarding mental health as much as possible. So that's one thing. As an employer, I guess it makes sense to just take this step back and see the people that are working on the team as your long-term partners. And if you're taking this approach, then it makes a lot of sense to make sure that these people don't burn out, don't lose motivation, that they are, you know, anything that changes in their lives outside of work or any crisis at work doesn't render them, you know, completely unproductive or like lost and unmotivated. It's pretty important for an employer, because this is the productivity of your team. This is where all the initiative comes from. This is where all the ability to act on responsibility comes from, because it's one thing to worry about things and another to actually have the energy to follow through and run the last mile and all that. So, you know, and there are different philosophies there. And I think a lot of them are kind of like traditional work ethic is a little bit short-sighted in the sense that, you know, there was this concept of a burnout shop back in the day, I think, of the dot-com bubble, where like, let's gather a team of people, let's work insane hours for 2 years. We'll all burn out, but we'll get a lot of money in the end. And, you know, if it actually works out. And this is a very short-sighted approach in the sense that, yeah, we'll work a lot. We will maybe get something, but after 2 years, we won't be able to work at all. And like, some people are luckier and have more physical resources to withstand incredible pressure, but most people will just be unproductive no matter what. Like, you may not acknowledge that you have burnout. You will be just very tired and not as productive as you used to be. And this is totally a mental health concern, because you know, just maintaining this balance between like how useful I am and how responsible I am, how much attention I pay to my work, and how dedicated I am, these are all like good things if you don't go overboard with that. And if you do, you just take so much toll on your health that you can be responsible all you want, but you won't be able to deliver. No. Especially if you are over the age of, I don't know, 25, because the younger the person, the more resources are in the reserve. But like over time, this reserve just wears off. And
when there's nothing left, there's nothing left. Like there really is nothing left, regardless.
In this sense, like work is very similar to partying, right? So when you're 20, you can party all night and then go to classes, and well, some people will not even notice. But like when you are 27 or 30 or some later age, it just doesn't work anymore. You can't party all night, but you can go to class the next day and maybe the day after next. And this happens at work as well. Like you're just not physically as resilient as you used to be. That's it. Like, and if the employer wants the team to work productively long term, if the horizon is not 2 years, but like 5, 10, 20 years, then yeah, you should care about the mental health.
Absolutely.
And and also if you're paying the health insurance bills, it definitely makes sense to care about mental health, because long-term mental health affects physical health in non-trivial ways.
I think one of my questions around developers finding access to mental health services, do you actually think it's more beneficial for a developer to seek a therapist that has an understanding of the tech ecosystem and what the actual job of a developer entails? Or actually, do you think it's quite important that, say, a software engineer does speak to a therapist that has a completely separate view of the world, and is not part of the day-to-day tech grind? They don't know what the role entails. Could that offer a fresh perspective? Or what are your thoughts on a developer who may be watching this, who would like to seek a therapy support and find someone that's right for them? What approach would you say is something that you've seen could work quite well?
Right. So there are multiple parts to this. The general advice is you don't need to seek a therapist with a similar experience to yours in general. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, if you have children, you don't need a person who also has children to understand you, because a good therapist is trained to be able to understand people vastly different from themselves. And it's a very important aspect of therapy. We are not seeking a friend who has like a similar background, and this is what our mutual understanding is based on. We're seeking a professional who's been trained to understand other things than their own experience. So that's general advice. But also, there is another aspect. So the therapist can be trained in anything, but if the client is just just can't trust a person taller than 6 feet, then that's it. Like, your training doesn't matter. Some things in a therapist can be triggering something in the client. So, and that's very different from one person to another. So some people will trust a therapist of their own gender. Some people will only trust a therapist of opposite gender. Some people want an older therapist. Some people want a therapist of their own age. So this is very, very personal. And so as a person, if you feel like you absolutely have to talk to someone with at least like a scientific background, and you will never trust anyone without a scientific background, then it's a little bit more of a challenge to find a therapist with this kind of background. I do not recommend looking for specifically a therapist who's also a software engineer. There are very few of those. But I think if you can't trust someone who cannot exhibit this kind of ethos of natural science background, then maybe it makes sense for you to look for such a person. I would generally recommend to first try just a good therapist, person who's well trained, and you'll probably be surprised that it doesn't really matter like what kind of work experience they had or other aspects like this. But if you're choosing between two therapists and one of them looks more trustworthy for whatever reason, like their background, what they look like, their like the pitch of their voice, anything, if that makes you feel more safe and more like opening up to them, choose the one that you trust more, like irrationally. That makes a lot of sense in terms of the effectiveness of your therapy. But like if you don't have a lineup of 10 software engineer therapists, just try a good one. It will probably work.
No, I just think, I don't think there was like a right or wrong answer. And I would love to run a LinkedIn search to see how many trained therapists there are with a background in software engineering. I'm sure the pool is very small, but I think it's just a big question that developers have where obviously, the work in itself, a lot of it, depending, especially more now, I do believe that to be a software engineer, as long as you've got a laptop and a stable Wi-Fi connection, you could work from anywhere. And I think a lot of software engineers maybe have more of a feeling of loneliness if they are working remotely. They might not necessarily feel it, but they might not like the social situations. And how do you put forward your amazing idea in a social circle in your team when you're afraid to kind of speak up? And I think it's just like, would they resonate more with people that understand this, or is it actually sometimes just good to have a really fresh, objective, person that's not clued up at all and is able to just offer a complete outside perspective to it all? So I think it's a really important, topic to talk about, and obviously from your experience as well, to be able to kind of share that knowledge with my network. But how do you see, I think this is actually quite an interesting topic as well, like how do you see tech intersecting with mental health awareness? And I guess this is actually where we could bring in a concept like AI into the conversation, because there is a lot being done on that as well. Very controversial, because therapy, it does not get more personal and subjective as therapy, right? But if we look at AI not only from a online therapist perspective, I'm not sure if you saw this news article, and I would love to find the source after this chat, but there was an article that I read, I think it was a few weeks ago, where the most asked question on Google with relation to AI was actually for an AI therapist chatbot. That was like the most, maybe you know what I'm talking about. I can see you smiling, but it was, of all of the questions you could ask AI, it was like, can I have an AI therapist? And I think for me, like, it's such a controversial topic because therapy is just, once again, so subjective, and it's extremely personal. And you need to be able to kind of open up emotionally to someone to understand maybe their advice and really listen. But at the same time, it's really interesting that the uptake of an AI chatbot for therapy is, seems to be aggressively increasing. So how do you kind of see technology intersecting within all that?
Well, it is helping already and will help more. So I think it's a separate question whether we can fully replace a therapist with an AI chatbot, and I don't believe we can anytime soon, but we can still benefit quite a bit from different kinds of chatbots. Even before AI, there were interesting results when people studied, compared therapy delivered by a human with some chatbots without any AI inside, just programmed scripts. And it's pretty interesting that some protocols, and in evidence-based therapy, there are protocols for different conditions, like things like a panic attack will be a condition with a special protocol, like general anxiety things will also have protocols, so on and so forth, like phobia as well. And so for some pretty narrow protocols, chatbots were performing nearly as good as humans. Not for all, for pretty narrow things, but still, like some things you can actually, even without any AI, you can get a huge improvement on through a chatbot. And also, like there is this modality of like different way of administering therapy and therapy-related mental health-related things that can be enabled by AI. Because if you think about it, when you work with a therapist, you meet maybe once a week, very rarely twice a week. And like every other day is not a therapy day for you.
Yeah,
So
and you could be going through those challenges on the day, and you've got to wait for the next week in order to be able to speak to someone about it.
Right. So whatever happens, you need to wait for the next session. And also, just to process it, you will, at best, you will write it down as a diary, and that is it. So with some AI-aided chatbot or something, we could help people reflect and process things in a way that helps their therapy. So you go to a session with a human therapist, but you can also get prepared through this like AI-assisted process that will help you, and that will actually make your therapy more productive, because you don't have to go through all the processing steps in the session. In the session, you can focus on integrating this experience, on whatever you need to do to change your patterns, so on and so forth. So it's like therapy has many layers, and one of them is basically noticing patterns of mood and thought and other aspects of your psychological being. So those things can be helped dramatically without humans, with AI and other technology. So that's for sure. There's another thing, which is emotional support. And some people have like very bright, vivid, negative emotions triggered by different things, and they just need like a few warm words, like words of validation and other things like that in the moment.
Yeah.
And very often a professional is not available in that moment. And chatbots seem to be reasonably good at delivering this, even today. So we can probably improve quite a bit on that. But like this aspect of therapy, which is also like one of many components in normal therapy, emotional support can be not fully automated, I guess, but can be helped quite a bit with AI. So I think there's quite a few things we can do better, and we can make therapy more efficient, and we can make clients much happier through AI and other technology.
It's almost like it's a pot, and if we fill half of it, I mean, like you said, there are actually so many different dimensions to therapy. There's not only the talking side, there's the educating on processes and practices that you can do, like CBT, breathing exercise, meditation. You need a bit of everything in order to kind of really start seeing positive changes. And it's almost like, again, that AI layer could be another additional support mechanism. But do you think it would be a concern or a challenge if someone just purely, was using an AI tool for their therapy? Do you think it could be in the long term quite destructive?
I don't know. I think it very much depends on the particular AI product they're using.
Okay.
In most cases, I would imagine like well-made technology will almost always be better than nothing. Like if you don't have time or you have to wait too long to access a human therapist, most of the time it will be much better than nothing to have some kind of technology solution, which is like temporary or not complete, but it's better than not having anything. So the safety is always a concern in therapy. and safety is always a concern in AI. So the intersection of the two is a very serious concern. And I don't think we have very good technology right now to make sure that our AI-based mental health things are safe. Nobody really knows how to do that. So we'll probably learn from experience how to make sure that our chatbots are actually working towards something good and not making things worse. I guess there is this aspect of when the client knows it's a chatbot and not a human, it's a little easier for them to see that the bot is doing something wrong. So when a human therapist is doing something wrong in a session, it's a social situation, and it can be like, it can sort of affect the client's judgment, because there is a power relationship between therapists and the client. But a chatbot is more of an abstract entity, a machine, and we are more or less used to machines being not always right. So it's not like there is no effect there. There is, but I guess it's a little easier for a human client to criticize a AI therapist. Yeah. So in this sense, there is a little bit of this ingrained skepticism will protect people a little bit more, but it's definitely not enough. So we'll have to do a lot more work on making sure these things are safe.
No, I agree. I think, and something that even opens up a whole can of worms, and we won't get into it today because it's honestly something that we could talk about for hours. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago. I won't name the name of the mental health tech platform, which again, similarly helps link the right people to therapists that work for them. But there's also a security aspect that comes into this. Where is all of this data stored? Obviously, it's extremely personal. There can't be any breaches of this sort of data. This is where on that face-to-face, you have the patient-client confidentiality. A lot of the times therapists write handwritten notes, they're locked away, etc. Nothing's logged on an electronic version at all. But obviously, when everything's done remotely, for example, a lot of the sessions are filmed, recorded, etc. Normally for the patient's use, so they can go back and watch it after. But, that has to be stored somewhere. If that goes anywhere on the internet, that is a complete breach of what is probably one of the most personal things that should happen on a video consultation. But there were cases where definitely one, and I think multiple mental health tech platforms whose mission should be to support patients were actually selling data to third parties to essentially monetize their business. Obviously not anything to do with the content of the conversations themselves, but just contact details. And it's okay, it's a very, again, very conflicting message. We're here to help better our patients' lives, but at the same time, we're going to try and still monetize this mental health tech business by selling the data. Again, yes. We don't need to go into it. And it was a very, very big topic. I think they got a lot of bad press about it. Like I said, I wrote, and if obviously you're listening to this, please go check out my LinkedIn profile, because I literally wrote a post about it and shared the article where it explains all of this. It was a couple of weeks ago. But a very, again, it's who can we trust? If it's not your therapist, that leads to even bigger questions around sometimes the use of technology to do certain things. But like I said, we won't get into that. Although if you have any thoughts or comments on that, that could be quite interesting. But I think it can, it can definitely be, can only be seen as negative, surely.
Yeah, so this is definitely a very big problem if people do this. I would also say it's like when we're talking about contact details, it is not a problem specific to therapy. So there is this trust aspect to any product, and you're right that we associate more trust with a service that provides mental health services compared to, selling you shoes or something.
Yeah.
And like it's less of a surprise that some other kind of like, retail service will be selling your contacts. It doesn't surprise you as much as a therapy service selling your contacts. But the good thing is, in this particular example that you're describing, it was not a therapy-specific data. It was just user-specific data. I'm not saying nothing ever happens with therapy-specific data. There can be malicious actors doing all kinds of bad stuff. But it's like I would really hate if people thought online therapy was untrustworthy because some people sell contacts on the internet. It's no different from these people selling your contacts after they sold you shoes.
Yeah. I think it's hard enough for people to sometimes make the move to want to try therapy in the first place, to then let alone have this overbearing worry in their head that I want this to be I only want myself to know about this and the therapist involved. I don't want somewhere in the world, a company out there, an advertising company, to have a list of all the people who are obviously looking for support right now.
Yeah.
And have a whole list of thousands of contacts of people then getting, promoted, I don't know, like weight loss programs or stuff like this. Like that's just completely counterintuitive to the whole process in the first place. So again, an interesting.
You're right. Of course, it's more vulnerable position in general, especially in our culture where therapy is stigmatized. I very much agree, and it's a big ethical obligation on the part of anybody who delivers this kind of services to to be considerate about this kind of trust issues, even if it's not regulated. Even if it's legal, it doesn't matter. As a mental health service provider, you have your own ethics, your own code of conduct, which stems from what people expect from therapy. Although this particular part of your service is not exactly therapy, doesn't matter. You have to pay attention to this.
Yeah, and I think, if you are a mental health tech company and you're not doing these things, you should make people aware that, we believe in 100% confidentiality, and these are the things that we do not do. Yeah. But yeah, some interesting topics there. But going back to you and your own startup, I think you set some really important context as to kind of what motivated you to actually start it. And that was a lot of it down to personal experience, which is great because it obviously means something so much to you. And we know more than anyone that, especially within technology, once you're passionate, and it goes for all sorts of jobs, when you're passionate about the subject and it's very personal, that's when you are normally more successful because it honestly means the world to you. But what were some of the biggest challenges because of this move to entrepreneurship, being a founder? What were some of the challenges that you faced during the early stages of setting up your own startup, which is also a lot of, it's a very, I would say, more common journey in tech than maybe other sectors. Tech is very much a sector where there is a lot less red tape to starting your own business. So a lot of people either have aspirations to go out and actually build their own app or start their own company, whether it be now or in 10 years' time. So it would be really interesting to hear kind of your experience of challenges that you faced kind of building something from the ground up at the beginning.
Right. So I guess there were different kinds of challenges. So some were very common for all kinds of startups, as just not knowing what you're doing in terms of business. Like I've never done any business before. And all the, learning of the ropes, like what's marketing, what's management of a company as an entity, like how do you how do you set up all the like legal stuff, all the payments, everything. So there's a lot of processes you need to figure out for the first time, what kind of metrics you need to care about, because again, having only worked for a company, a lot of things were completely hidden from me, and I'm very thankful for them having been hidden. Like accounting, never paid any attention to that. Like lots of legal stuff, like registering a trademark, lots of stuff there. But another aspect is, like one of the things that are very nice about many kinds of tech startups is all you need is tech. Like when you are doing, like, for example, when you're doing a game, like everything that's delivering your product is tech. And in our case, we have human therapists. So that's a new aspect. Like it's not only a program that's working there, and it's not so much a program that's working there. Yeah, there is some, website with some logic in it, some algorithm for matching and all that, but it's very much secondary. What's important to the client is how their therapy goes, and it's a human. And like we need to work with many human therapists and make sure it's convenient for them, and make sure we can match them like correctly with clients. And we need to create an infrastructure for them so that it's convenient for them, and they get paid on time and all that. So it's a huge world outside of writing compilers. Like compilers are programs. You don't have to deal with any humans that deliver your services to your clients. Yeah, so that was an interesting challenge as well. And it's pretty interesting that, like, as a company, we don't employ hundreds of people. We currently have less than 100 people, but we work with hundreds of therapists, and they're not employees, they're partners, but still, like, we do provide infrastructure for them. We do take responsibility for what they do. So, it's not quite an employment relationship, but there are a lot of aspects that are similar. So in this sense, it's a much bigger company in the like counting the people you take responsibility for. So that was a challenge as well. And then it's just the normal things. Focus on the important things and not on all things, which is a big challenge for me all the time. I'm very easily distracted with new ideas. Yeah, grind in like very right places that make a difference. And hiring people who are not programmers was a very new experience. I wasn't good at that. A big part of any online business is marketing. So we struggled a long time with hiring the right marketing people. That was a big journey. It took me a while to admit that I don't know how to do that. I was trying to do it like by ear, and it didn't work by ear. I mean, they were good people, but they weren't good for the job. And, it took us quite a long time, and we lost a lot of money. Just didn't earn a lot of money because of that. But we finally figured that out with just getting some external help. Like, ask good marketing people to conduct interviews for you. Yeah. So not even recommend. So actually, in our case, recommendations didn't work very well because there aren't very many available professionals. Like, from a network of some very prominent marketing person, they will all be in jobs. It's not like they are very often available. But yeah, help us do the interviews, help us analyze what we see in the interviews. That helped a lot. So it was an interesting journey, just hiring the kind of people I've never hired before. Also, like, building a customer support function in the company, something I've never done before. I didn't work on it myself very much, but we discussed that with my co-founder quite a bit, and many things like that. And now, like, financial stuff, selling the company. Before that, hiring a CEO.
So many different branches. Basically, just every single aspect probably was a learning journey in itself. You probably started uncovering. I mean, I think if you had a manual for how to start a business, which I'm sure there are multiple of online, none of them are 10 pages. It's gonna be expensive. But I'm glad that you brought up hiring and recruitment as part of obviously a big challenge. Obviously, that is my bread and butter. These are the exact same things, obviously, albeit not from a marketing perspective, but at the end of the day, a company is only as good as its people. The way that a team, when you're running a race, is only as good as its slowest person. With the right team and the right services between you, that is when obviously great companies and great products are born, when obviously the right people are doing the right things cohesively. But can you highlight some rewarding experiences or milestones, no matter if they're really silly and small or if they were huge, but just things that that happened very early on where you were like, wow, okay, I can't believe this has just happened, this is awesome. I don't know, it could be the first website creation or logo, or it could obviously be something sort of very low level in terms of something that happened behind the scenes that was huge. Can you think of one or two examples that were kind of huge moments for you?
Well, I think when we were getting our first clients, it felt incredibly good.
Yeah.
And we started with just a few therapists. I think we had about 50 therapists in the beginning. And we just put out some very basic first matching mechanism that was actually a chatbot. Pre-AI was 2017. But nonetheless, we were actually getting customers. Most people only came to look at the chatbot, but some did actually find a therapist through it. And that was very fulfilling. We saw that there is demand. People care about this. Some people actually get therapy, and the whole thing starts moving. Our therapists get clients, they get paid, so we get our commission. This whole thing from a concept on paper and a bunch of technical things arranged, it turned into a working thing. And that was a big deal. And then after quite some hard work, there was a moment when we reached break even. And that was really nice. That was when I thought that we were probably doing something right. We're onto something here, and that it could work as a business, because in the beginning, I had no idea if you could make money off this.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it wasn't even my intention to make money. It was let's promote therapy. But then you realize that to sustain the company, to pay all the people on your payroll, you need the company to make money. And when we started making slightly more than we were spending, it felt like, all right, so this is working for real. It's not some kind of pie in the sky idea for improving the world. It's a working thing. It will be improving the world, regardless of myself putting a lot of energy into it. So yeah, it was pretty big. And then all kinds of growth and little successes with people saying thank you privately or publicly. And even when people were some clients weren't happy, and when we were able to address their issues and they say thank you after that, that was great.
I mean, just the acknowledgement that even if it's just one person that you were able to, I know that phrase it's been overused for years and years when people tell their stories, but they say, if this just helped one person, that's its full purpose intended and achieved. But for something as life-changing as therapy can be, just that thank you could obviously mean the world to you as the founder. And I completely understand why that would be. I guess just our kind of last maybe question that I'll put out there about mental health tech is how or where do you see the next few years of mental health technology going? What do you think are some things that we'll be able to start seeing in the not so distant future?
Well, I very much hope that we'll just see more mental health, like human therapists, more available through very basic tech, because the world is very much behind on this one. Like even the startup that we built it for Russian-speaking people with Russian-speaking therapists. Even just replicating that on other markets would definitely improve the situation. As far as I can see, even in the UK, there's still space for such a project. And I'm kind of considering maybe I should do this again. I'm not a big fan of doing the same thing again, but I am considering this because I'm currently looking for a therapist in the UK, and it's a pain. So, even that, like, we are, as the civilization, we are very much behind on very basic things in terms of delivery of therapy. So I hope this happens. It depends on multiple things, but I think it should happen. So that's one thing. Another thing is what we talked about with supporting therapy with tech, where we can make human therapists much more effective with the same clients through like lots of different tools. We could make we could offload lots of routine work onto like tech tools of all sorts, like not only chatbots, all kinds of tech tools. So that's something nobody really figured out completely, but people are working on this. And also, I think we can make some parts of mental health methods, like not entire CBT, probably not entire other methods of therapy, but some functional parts that are helpful on their own can be delivered purely through tech without human intervention. And it will make it a lot more available. It will make it much cheaper, because currently therapy is really, really expensive.
It's really expensive. And, we tend to look at things a lot of the time from like a Western perspective, where even in the West, we're saying it's expensive, and we're in some of the most developed countries in the world. If we look at, where technology has not been able to be, show as many benefits as we know that it can serve here. If we look at, it's not like people in Africa and Asia don't have any problems and don't need the therapy. Of course, they should have access to the same resources. But if we're finding it expensive, this is almost an absolutely impossible option. And it's all about actually, with the use of AI, with the use of tech, how can we expand the remit and just completely change that accessibility piece to those people that actually probably could do with it even more than maybe some of us do.
Right. Yeah. So it's not very available even in the rich countries. In the less rich countries, it's even less available, which is a problem on its own. So the tech side of things will help that to some extent. It will not fully solve this problem probably in foreseeable future, like before the singularity hits, but it will help a little bit. Other things, like there's another aspect of, like when a human therapist works with a client, there is this aspect of therapy, it's called supervision, where like as a therapist, you need some feedback on how you work.
I know this because I actually have a very close friend of mine who is a therapist, and therapists also have therapists basically to make sure that their own personal triggers, to make sure that actually their well-being is also, tended to, essentially. Sorry, I feel like I cut you, but
yeah. So therapists go to therapy themselves, at least good ones do, but also you need, like, as a professional, you need to have an outside perspective on how you work with clients in particular. And this is a very costly thing. Like, you, as a therapist, you can't afford to get this feedback on every client you work with, just because the time of your supervisor is more expensive than your work time. So you can't do one-to-one mapping. And So another aspect of where tech can help is, of course, like a bot cannot be your supervisor, but they can help process your sessions so that they are so that it doesn't take as much time for a supervisor to give you useful feedback. So you can chop up the session and identify the important moments that need the attention of the outside person to provide enough feedback for the therapist to improve how they work. So that's another aspect of how we can improve therapy in general. And this is how we can improve how every individual therapist works, and overall how therapy as practice can be more efficient for clients. So it's a pretty difficult interconnected system of many factors, but I hope it gets improved over time, probably in stages, but it should happen.
Just with regards to kind of you and your personal growth, obviously your journey building Kotlin versus your journey building Alter are so different. What would you say is kind of one key area of personal growth that was different and that you learned through building Alter? I know that probably putting it on one is obviously just only touching on the subject, but if you had to put one key thing that you learned that was different to the growth that you went on at JetBrains, what would that be?
I think it's one core thing with two aspects, which is working with a partner, because I have a co-founder and it was very new, working with sharing responsibility and not having the last say, all this was very new for me. And great, by the way, we get along very well. And on the other hand, it's working overseeing things I don't know how to do myself. Because as an engineer managing engineers, it was very easy because I understood every bit of work other people were doing. Here, lots of things I can't do myself at all. And that was, as a control freak, it was very difficult to sort of learn to just trust other people and deal with consequences if they do something wrong, as I'm used to dealing with consequences when I do something wrong. So that's it's fundamentally how my trust pattern changed, and both towards my co-founder and towards other people on the team who just did things I didn't know how to do.
That's really interesting. And I think there's so much to take away from what you've just said, in the sense that a big part of that was delegation of tasks that you had no experience or expertise in, but trusting the right people where that is their area. And then kind of working in very close collaboration where all of you play to your strengths to essentially build something that is just really, really impactful all around. But that being said, I'm sure you've learned some fantastic things on marketing and legal that you probably did not know.
Well, I'm still not sure if I needed to know them, but yeah, I've learned quite a few.
Cool. Well, just to wrap things up towards the end, this part is all about advice for developers, because like I said, there's been quite a lot of questions that we've talked and addressed that have been asked by developers, but this is more just a segment that we can share with your personal views, on what you think is important and advice that you would offer to them. So just to kind of kick that off, what advice would you offer to developers who are just kind of starting out their software development careers?
Well, I guess I'm for the beginners, what I can say is go deeper in general. Knowing how things work on the inside makes you a much more valuable professional in any profession, but very specifically software engineering in particular. If you're using a function, take the time to look at how it actually works. If you're using a framework, look it up, see how it's actually organized inside. What are the trade-offs there? One of the best interview questions I've heard of is, okay, I click a link in the browser and then a page opens. What happens in between? And there are many different ways to answer this question, but the better you can see the whole picture, and like it's a lot of things happening in between these two, a lot. And there is like a simpler model with one central server, no caching on your local network. But if it's YouTube opening, there can be something local happening. You know, it's like you can dive into this, and it's not some one particular topic you need to drill down to the bottom and know everything about. It's everything you work with. Like if you need a tool, look into how it works. It will make you so much of a better developer, a better engineer. So that's one thing. I think it works very universally across the industry. It doesn't matter what kind of role you're in. The more you know the under the hood stuff, the better engineer you are.
And I would actually just echo that, because obviously when I get given requirements from heads of engineering in terms of what they're looking for when they build their teams, the movement has very much gone from they need experience with microservices architecture, Docker and Kubernetes alongside the back end. But now it's more kind of moved to, okay, I need someone who has used Docker and Kubernetes, but I need them to understand why they're using it and why this is the best tool for what we're doing. So it's not only using it, but understand why you're even using it in the first place.
Yeah, this is a sign of the technology maturing. So in the beginning, like early adopters were only the people who were interested in this. And so they automatically looked under the hood. But now, as these things are more popular, everybody uses them, and a lot of people just never paid attention to why. Yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing is, in general, for all professionals, not only beginners, to pay attention to the fact that you're not only a developer, you're a person operating like in an environment with other people. And there is usually, for most people, there is a lot of unutilized resource in this realization, because you can make your work situation, your work experience so much better and so much more effective through just paying attention to yourself and others being humans, that it will be a very dramatic change to your entire career and your entire work experience. So, and therapy comes in nicely here. It's one of the ways you can improve your understanding of how humanity of people affects everything. And it does. So, a lot of people have this view that sort of introduces an opposition between rationality and emotions, or like psychological things. And I very much oppose this. I think like the only productive view is that emotions are real. They are not material in the sense that you cannot touch them with your fingers, but they're very real. You can't escape them. There's no way you switch them off in either yourself or other people. And the only rational approach to this is actually accounting for emotions. And like we can be frustrated that our simple models of how humans should behave, quote unquote, logically, may not match how things actually work. But this is because the models are bad, not because people are bad. People are reality. Models are too simple.
Especially in software development, where there's so many opinions on even how to go about the same problem. It's understanding diversity, and it kind of all turns that conversation to diversity and inclusion. How everyone's different doesn't mean one person's necessarily more right or wrong than the other. It's understanding difference in opinions and mentalities. And that's what builds the best teams as well.
It's a very good point. So understanding that other people are different from you, not necessarily because they're from a different background. They're just different people. They have different brains. So they are not all the same as you are. And to realize this, you need to know yourself a little bit. Like, you need to be able to tell apart whether something is your opinion or your perspective or a fact. Lots of facts only seem to be facts and are actually your personal perception. Mm-hmm. So my second advice will be pay attention to your own humanity and humanity of other people. It will make you much happier over time.
Just being self-aware, basically.
Yeah.
Cool. So just to finish with Andrey, because this has been a really insightful conversation covering so many different things, but what resources or learning pathways would you recommend to developers kind of looking to advance their skills, not only maybe on a technical perspective, but we can also look at personal growth as well?
Well, so for technical, you have the best resource out there. It's the source code of all the systems you're using. Fortunately, it's very fashionable to be open source nowadays. Lots of things are available in source code. Read that. It helps a lot. So looking under the hood, this is the ultimate looking under the hood. Like, look at the code. And in terms of self-awareness and other sort of human-related skills, I'm not the best person to recommend a resource here, because I'm this kind of learner who just leverages being able to talk to people. And so all I learned, well, most of what I learned comes from conversations with people who know more about this than I do. So I talk to a lot of psychologists. But also, I guess, a lot of this comes from just very basic management advice. So like popular books on management, like Hard Thing About Hard Things, or like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and books like that. A lot of people, I think, despise them for being like management bullshit, quote unquote, but they are actually books about humans. And this is how humans actually work. So, I very much recommend to be a little bit open-minded about what they have to offer, because they can tell you a lot about how things work around you. Even if you're not a manager, you're in an environment where managers are relevant. So those books describe this environment very well. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Andrey, for what's been, in my opinion, I don't know about you, I've really massively enjoyed this. Once again, I've seen you speak back in November 2023 about something completely different. That was about the growth of Kotlin and its journey in terms of the creation of the programming language itself, to now actually looking at everything that you've done post-Kotlin, which in itself has been actually just an entirely new journey altogether, and even as exciting, if not more, than obviously the first one that you went on. So thank you for joining me on this chat, which is all about Beyond Kotlin, a conversation with yourself, the creator, Andrey Breslav. And yeah, could not thank you more for your time, and looking forward to hopefully doing another talk like this soon.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Great questions. It was a very, very interesting conversation. Thanks for having me, and have a nice day, everyone.